welcome to the Which Way Is Up show with Michi and Scott. I am Michi.
And I am Scott. The WWIU show offers us an opportunity to participate in the public conversation while being critical about social concerns in an effort to become more engaged citizens. So first of all, today's Sunday. What's today? Sunday, February 27th. And we tried to get this show done this past Tuesday, but we had continuous technical difficulties.
Monday.
Was it Monday? It was Monday, the holiday. That's right, the holiday. And it didn't work out. So we just felt that the universe wasn't with us. So we had to just say, you know what, we'll just do this on the weekend. And in that time, we planned on talking about some current events before we got into the topic or the theme for this particular episode. But since Monday, there's just been a whole lot of current events going on.
Yes, there has been. To go back to what you were saying about the universe, it was definitely telling us something.
A sign.
Oh, it was a clear sign. And, you know, one thing I want to make clear is that doing this podcast is a lot more than just talking. You and I aren't just sitting here talking. Yes, we are, but I have gained a greater appreciation for the technical aspects.
You and me both.
As a musician, I get that this is a constant, and I've had to have this conversation with you before, that, you know, as a musician, if showtime is at 5, we're expected to be there at 4, because as many times as you set up mics and wires and everything else, something will always go wrong. And so you want to give yourself plenty of time and grace to work through whatever the difficulty is. But Monday was just clearly, today is not the day to do this. So
because we started an hour early on Monday. We usually did it like around 7, but Monday we was like, let's do it at 6.
Right.
And that's how we knew that it just wasn't meant to be.
And it was several things. It wasn't just one thing. First, it was like, anyway, so not, but
we're here now, and we're in person now today. Monday we were on Zoom.
Yes, I haven't seen you since last
year. Yes. Because we had the germ right before the holiday. And then we started to incorporate this whole Zoom thing, which has been great, really. The whole visual has been great, even though we're not utilizing the entire recording of the video. But it's been a little more, it's been more simple on the audio aspect, because Zoom does the video recording and the audio 2 separate files. So it's like that makes it a lot easier, and also adds that video experience. But, being in person, feeling each other's energy, the eye contact.
No, and you got your Christmas gift right just before the
before the summer,
before Father's Day,
which is the summer. So, but it's right on time. Mm-hmm. It's right on time.
So speaking of right on time, let's jump right in, because we like we said, it's been a while since we've been in person doing this. And, you know, we are, by our own standard, delayed in getting our next episode out. So let's jump right in.
Right. So what really pushed everything back as far as current events is the current situation in Ukraine. I want to be careful the way I describe it.
Yes.
You know, I don't want to say war. It is war. It's definitely war, but it's not World War III. It's not, it hasn't reached that level. I'm not saying that can't happen, but we're not there. But it is an invasion. I want to keep clear, though, the one thing that there's a lot of shock value imaging on social media, mm-hmm. that is definitely capturing the horrors of war, which I think is important, right? But at the same time, it's making it appear that this is something that's out of the ordinary, right? And it's not. And many people are really starting to push the issue and, remind us that these type of invasions are going on all the time. And particularly with Russia and Ukraine, like that's happened before, right? But there's other parts of the globe that this happens regularly that doesn't get the attention. It doesn't get the media attention from the corporate Western controlled media. And it doesn't. So when that doesn't happen, it doesn't get the attention on social media because people are not paying attention. So now we're just getting just extra the messaging is extra now. Like I mentioned the other day, the generic, I'm with Ukraine, I was expecting that. So now everybody's with Ukraine because they are seeing the horrors of what's being done to Ukraine. And, I don't know how to describe it other than just the savagery of the Russian invasion. But I want to also be careful of how I talk about this. So I really want to capture this from a media lit perspective, just like I started doing. But I really want to be careful as far as the way I describe what's going on, because it's a complicated situation.
Absolutely.
And it's not just a right versus wrong, us versus them, left versus right type of situation. There's many different points of view, all that are relevant to what's going on. There's a lot of history. Some people think it goes back the past month or two. Some people think it goes back to 8 years ago. And some people also talking about how this goes back to like before World War II, as far as when Russia was actually the Soviet Union and Ukraine was part of that federation.
Right.
So, and it's also been an educational experience for me, because while I'm being mindful and I'm pausing with the images that are coming across my feed, that's one thing. Like this media lit knowledge and experience is really coming in handy right now, because we're always at war. We're always at war. Like we just got out of a 20-year war as far as Afghanistan. But it's one thing when there's just war going on, and there's another thing when the war begins. So when the war begins, it gets a lot of attention. There's a lot of emotion behind it. Like if you think back of, immediately after 9/11 and all the emotion and the energy that went into, how we must retaliate. And, we weren't pausing. We were just reacting or whatever. And that gained a lot of public support as far as what the U.S. was getting ready to do.
Right. And
we now look back at that situation and realize how fucking wrong that was. I'm self-disclosure. I was one of those people that was angry and thinking that, the solution is to retaliate or whatever. And, now looking back on it, even during that process later on, that I realized I was wrong. So this time around, I'm reflecting on that experience and definitely not jumping to conclusions this time.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I do not keep up on a lot of current events. There's enough happening in my neighborhood. That's difficult for me to keep up with. And this is an argument that I've often had with people when I tell them that I don't watch the news. They ask me, well, how do you keep on top of what's happening in the world? And my answer to that is, if I cannot directly impact what's happening in the world, then why do I need to know? Why do I need to? And it's not because I want to stay ignorant, but it's more about many times the conclusions that we jump to is because we are immersing ourselves in so much information and overstimulating our brain that there is no time to think. And that's exactly what corporate controlled media wants us. They want us to stay in this constant space of being overloaded with the imagery and the information and the emotions to sway our train of thought. The one thing this whole time, while it is disheartening to think about just average citizens, people like you and I, who just are waking up every day, feeding their families, going to work, coming back, participating in whatever it is that makes up their life, having to withstand something like going to sleep in a subway station or, you know, because of whatever's happening. That is disheartening. However, I also learned in the pause and in being surrounded by like-minded individuals who are also paying attention to media literacy and keeping on top of mis and disinformation, understanding that there's layers to this, that this isn't something that just started, that the U.S. has a lot to do with the situation historically. Again, they didn't just start. So, you know, there is major hypocrisy happening there. Surprise, surprise. But another layer is the stories that are surfacing now of blatant racism and bigotry happening to Blacks, Latinos, Arabs who are in Ukraine, trying to flee Ukraine, and Ukrainian citizens are being allowed to enter surrounding countries as refugees, but not the Black, Latino, or Arab. So again, it's another layer, and it really, while again, I feel for the average citizens, because any war, it's like all these big politicians just trying to support their own interests, not thinking about the average person like you and I and our listeners. But then adding to that, the racism, the bigotry, the misogyny of it all, it's just, and so that's where my focus goes to, you know. So yeah, it's a lot to, this is another reason why I don't immerse myself in the news 24/7, because energetically it's just not a good look for me.
You know, speaking about being on top of what's going on, staying on top of everything, it's impossible. It's impossible. What I've learned, you know, we can only stay informed as much as what we're focused on. And if we try to focus on everything, we try to spread ourselves out, we're going to definitely burn ourselves out. So, you know, that there's no way to just, between, what's going on locally, nationally, and now, you know, internationally. And I'll admit, like, you know, I've just really gotten a grip and a better understanding as to what's going on around us in the immediate area. So when it comes to like foreign policy and stuff like that, it's foreign to me, you know. So it requires that I probably pause, should not really be speaking on it. But if I'm interested in learning about it, then I need to learn about it and do more listening.
Yes.
So that, you know, that's what I've been doing. But what you just mentioned about, the people fleeing, the Ukrainian, people fleeing, you know, I didn't know what the racial makeup was there. You know, obviously it's not going to be as diverse as like the U.S., but so I didn't understand, but I didn't realize that there were a good amount of students in the Ukraine that are Black and brown. And then but my first thing was when I heard them, you know, people evacuating, rushing to the border, you know, in anticipation of a complete invasion. Because right now we just don't really know what the plan is, you know, if they really want to go that far or they're just sending a message or whatever. But I was just thinking, like, you know, there's always an issue in other regions of the world when people are trying to flee, when their homeland is being, you know, bombed and being hit with airstrikes and there's always an issue with other nations wanting to accept them in. And a few days ago, it was just like, yeah, come on. Like, you know, it was like there was an appeal to what was going on and there was empathy there, whatever. And then now, yesterday, today, we're getting a better look at, you know, some of those people are not being let in or not being let in as easily as, Ukrainian citizens, white Ukrainian citizens.
Right.
So it is, and I hate to always have to talk about it, but it always needs to be talked about because it always involves race, colorism, white supremacy. I wanted to just keep it simple and just maintain an anti-war stance, like regardless of who might be right or who might be wrong. And you just mentioned it, like this impacts the citizens, right? Regular people, regular working class, poor class people, and the politicians, they're not on the ground, so I always keep that in mind. So, regardless, because I see a lot of people in efforts to stand with Ukraine, quote unquote, people are taking on a stance that is like cheering them on, as far as them defending themselves, which they should be. But the bottom line is like war is just not good for anyone. Not good for anyone. Like,
right.
And we're like anti-militarism, anti-imperialism.
Yeah. So
regardless of who looks like the bad guy here, like all around, it's just a fucked up situation and people are dying.
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you. Like I just said, I can't even absorb a lot of what I see. What I do see, I'm getting it from like people that I follow, news, I was sharing with you earlier, like Spanish language news. I don't share because I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know the real situation. I know only what I'm being told until I can sit and really dig into the history. There was some stuff that I saw that, like you mentioned before, this potentially goes back 8 years. And I know that Ukraine just became its own nation in the 90s. 95, 97 maybe. So it's a relatively young country. And so these are all things that I'm figuring out. And just to see people sharing things and knowing who these people are. And it's like, you probably don't even know what I just said, anyway, it really is testing my newfound mission of the mis and disinformation. Mm-hmm. And I just really hope that people are doing, what they have to do to stay informed, but not get overwhelmed. I'm sure it's no secret. I do follow a lot of like spiritual, minded people on social medias. And what a lot of them are saying is stay away from the news.
Right.
Because again, you want to stay informed, but unless you plan on getting on a plane and going to Ukraine and building a bomb shelter for these people, what can you do? You're just giving yourself anxiety and depression thinking about it, and then also to sit here and be like, oh, well, it's so brave that the U.S. is like, even that's a false narrative. Learn what the true story is before you put yourself in this position where you're standing on false pride or unnecessary depression and anxiety or whatever, so let's keep ourselves informed.
Before we move on, I know we don't want to make this the whole Ukraine-Russia show, but I did want to just say, and this is like, as far as like, you just touched on it about not listening to the news or whatever. And that's pretty much my initial reaction. Like, I need to just turn this off and tune out. I feel powerless or whatever. And I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine. She's from Albania and, an immigrant to this country. She's been here since she's a kid. I can't tell you exactly how long, but it's been a while. And she reminded me that the U.S., the general public, really has no clue as to what goes on anywhere in this world, let alone inside the U.S. And she was explaining to me how European news coverage is a lot different. And then I hear that a lot from as far as countries in the East, where, so the recommendation has been to get news from outside of the U.S. to get a perspective. So for instance, thank God for podcasts, by the way, because that's our our window into other worlds, right? So I was listening to a podcast that I listen to quite often, and they had a journalist living inside from, I think he was an American journalist, but moved to Ukraine like several years ago, live in Kiev.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you say it, right? Kiev. He was there. So he was like reporting now mind you, this was a few days ago. So this is a constantly updating, changing situation.
Yes.
This was a few days ago. So what he was reporting at that time was that, and it looked a lot different on social media, but everybody wasn't fleeing the city. Like people were going about their day to day.
Yes.
And then he did acknowledge that once those war sirens, I forgot what they're called, but
yes.
Those sirens that people are being aware, but not necessarily everyone is fleeing,
yes.
right? But they're being aware, they're preparing. A lot of them are arming themselves and looking how to participate with defending their homeland along with the military. So he pointed that out. Then he also pointed out, because he was a leftist, and he was criticizing other leftists for in the US putting out misinformation and
mm-hmm.
disinformation and not really understanding, or not even trying to really understand what's going on the ground and how complicated it was. It's
yes.
just like a good guy, bad guy. There's Nazis over there, blah, blah. You know what? There's Nazis over here too. But you motherfuckers ain't been paying attention to that. And I'm always talking about it. People looking at me like I'm crazy, like I'm exaggerating. But anyway, and then one last thing I want to mention with that, one thing I saw on social media, and reflecting back to, the occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan. And so that was another generation. Like you and I were like barely young adults at the time or whatever. But now there's a newer generation that's coming up and being exposed to the onset of hopefully not something that's going to be a lot worse than it is, or mm-hmm. last a lot longer. So now we have social media that's fully involved in this. We've got, the TikTok and I particularly want to talk about something I saw on TikTok, where I saw a post of two brothers, two young kids in the military in a helicopter going somewhere with their rifles showing or whatever, smiling, and just on TikTok. That was a little concerning for me, because fuck are you smiling about? Like, what are you laughing about? First of all. Yeah. And then of course I go into the comments and I see things like, and it got a lot of, this was like 2 days after, like 2 days late. It had already been up for 2 days. Mm-hmm. And I guess it was a viral video or whatever. And, just the comments, like, first of all, naturally people are, they see people in the military and, they're just like, they just screaming for blood and like, yeah. One person said, Putin ain't said anything since this video went up. And just the whole image of it, like, if it's some type of fucking game, and just thinking about the gun culture, because a lot of people were focused on their guns mm-hmm. or whatever. And if you really want to get honest about it, they weren't headed nowhere over there, because the U.S. is not involved as far as putting soldiers in Ukraine. So right. You might have been part of some mission to deliver shit, to deliver ammunition, but their post was a front, and they didn't say it, but they just kind of let it, go. They insinuated, like, they did say that they said somebody got to protect the Ukrainian people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, God help us, yo. Like, this is such a game.
No sense of discernment. Like you said, pause. If you have been watching the news, what you just said. There's no there's no troops, like on the ground over there. Exactly. So what, like, yeah.
And most people wouldn't know that unless they've been paying a little attention to it.
Right. And watching the news that makes sense or matter instead of the hype.
So moving on, we're going to talk about Joe Rogan. I know you were a little curious.
Yeah, so let me just... Joe Rogan.
I've been interested. I've been wanting to have this convo with you.
I know. A couple weeks ago, it came out that Neil Young decided to pull his music from Spotify because they gave Joe Rogan a contract, a deal, whatever. And then his guests at the time were anti-vaxxers and whatever. And I'll be honest with you, when I first saw that article, I was like, as much as I love Neil Young, it's Neil Young. Like, it's not like he's not, and I don't stay on top of like current events or artists or mainstream anything.
I don't even know who that is.
Like, yeah, I mean, Neil Young he's a musician. He's like decades. He's, I love his music.
Made a lot of noise though.
But he did because he's Neil Young. Yeah. So it's almost like as if, Paul McCartney were to come out against, right. That's, it's Paul McCartney. Neil Young carries his weight in the music industry. And then Joni Mitchell followed. And then, she's not an artist, but she's a researcher and, a social worker who has made national, she's written books, and I read one of her books, Brene Brown, just very powerful. She followed suit. And so it just made me curious because I was like, what is going on? And then on top of that, there were 2 times when I encountered Joe Rogan, and both times it was by a proclaimed libertarian who I immediately unfollowed and just totally cut ties with because of the level of batshit crazy that was going on there. And then someone else that was just not an informed individual. I know was somebody who did not take the time to do his homework. It was more like, oh, because my brother said he's cool, then, mm-hmm. Or because like, and that was just, and then what they shared with me when I heard it was just, it was abrasive. It was unnecessary. It was not even like, I was like, why? Like, I just didn't understand why a man like Joe Rogan even, fine, freedom of speech, I don't care, but you're not going to get my earlobes. And again, those were the 2 instances. Now, maybe that was just really bad luck for Joe Rogan as far as Michelle Carpenter's admiration of him. I don't know. But, I'm sure he doesn't care. So when this happened, I was just curious because I was like, okay, here are 3 people that are well known to me anyway. And I respect and love. So it just backed up my previous experience with him already. Now here's 3 strikes. And I'm not a baseball player, but I don't know no other game where you get more tries. So I'm go with that. And then I remember you telling me, well, he has done some shows where he just kind of brings people on to speak, gives them that platform to speak. And then he kind of like follows them on whatever it is that they're saying. Right. As a way to kind of expose them for who they are, whether that's good or bad, yes. So I can get with that. But again, some of the guests that he has, if that's the case, then some of the guests that he has, and from, again, my limited experience with him, the majority of the guests that he has are people that I try very hard to stay very far away from. Same. And so that's why I was like, okay, good. If people are good, because again, that's me. Now I understand the freedom of speech thing. I am all for it. But again, me personally, if he got canceled and whatever it is that people are doing now, I really could care less,
Just to, just in case anyone that's listening don't really understand exactly how this particular topic popped off, like a couple of weeks ago, it was because, they focused on one of his guests, particularly, which was one of these, anti-vax doctors. And he gave him the platform to, do what he does. And he just started talking this bat shit. anti-vax stuff that a lot of people follow. Joe Rogan is an interesting character because everything what you just described about, not really watching him or listening to him, but you have come across clips and certain characters that are on there. And from what I can see, a lot of the people that he has on there are people that I'm not really going to entertain anyway. But I did mention that there were 2 shows that I did watch in this is on YouTube. I didn't listen to it. I watched it. In its entirety, and that was because of the guests, and one of them was Cornel West, and then there was another one, Abby Martin, who's a journalist that I follow. Right. Great shows, great conversation, especially with Cornel West, right? Because that's when it kind of gave me a different window into Joe Rogan, because because he's not the type of person that is going to attack his guests, right? Or whatever. He's kind of like a shapeshifter type of, right? So he kind of like you said, goes with the flow of his guests
to expose
and
them.
Whatever. Now that that doesn't say he won't debate them on certain things, but for the most part, he'll kind of morph into who his guest is, or he'll morph into, aligning himself with the opinions and the ideology of his guests or whatever, which he did with Cornel West. But it wasn't like it was like a bogus front that he was just going along with it to get along. Like he was really having a deep exchange with him, and they were talking about stuff, like some good, like we talk about, like they got into some stuff. Same thing with Abby Martin. Now, if you'd have watched the show with Abby Martin, you would think Joe Rogan was a leftist. Like because Abby Martin is a hard leftist. She's not a liberal, Democrat, anything. Like her whole thing is going at liberals and Democrats. And so he took on that mind frame when he was engaging in a discussion with her, which ultimately tells me that, because the perception could be about him that I think he's like an ex-MMA fighter or whatever, the whole alpha male type thing. And that leads to people thinking, they're not really too intelligent, too smart. He's very intelligent as far as business wise. Because first of all, he has like the top podcast, like ever, like forever. Like he's got millions and millions of views and listeners or whatever. And his brand, his way of doing things is probably the reason why, like the way he morphs into, who it is. What's made him so popular, and I heard somebody talking about this, what really made him appealing, particularly to libertarians, conservatives, people on the right, is that he's viewed as an outsider, like Trump, right? Like, they get this pass. So he appears to be the average blue collar working guy that, I'm with you. I hear you. I understand you and I get you. But the reality is, like, he's sitting on top of the podcast game. I don't even know what he's worth, but, and I heard that he came into the podcast game a millionaire already.
He did, because he was originally, a reality TV show star. And I think that's another strike against him for me, because there's never been such a thing as reality TV, but that's a topic for another podcast. And so he was already just, and again, it's not that I can't stand the guy or I can't, no, but I was never interested in him. Like you said, he was an ex-MMA. Okay, congratulations. I hate sports. Oh, he's a reality TV. Congratulations. I can't stand watching TV. Oh, I'm just going to sit here and like morph into, oh, great. And you're spineless. It's another reason I can't, so again, every time he would come up for me, it was like, yeah, still not interested, so for me to hear that all these people were canceling him, I was like, I've been like, join the club. Like I was holding the door open for them. So, but again, to hear, like, I'm really interested in hearing those 2 podcasts.
They're really good. Really
and I'm sure, I just really feel also like the fact that he's, a millionaire on top of the podcast game, that, again, still not impressed because he was already a reality TV show star. And given what that means in our society, look at the Kardashians. Like, you know what I mean? Like, reality TV is the gateway to making stupid people famous, And so again, because I have not heard enough of what the man has to say. But with everything that I've outlined, not to mention, for me, the nail in the coffin, and I watched his apology for this, but there's never an excuse, was that, somebody put together a compilation of the many times that he dropped the N-bomb. And he tried to spin it like it was taken out of context. And so whatever, again, don't care enough about the man to, elaborate or even look into what he has to say. But like, for me, that's just not, there's never, and he put his apology out there, but dude, MMA, reality TV, on top of your podcast game, now is when you're coming to find out that that's not cool. Only after, right. Receipts, sorry, I've already seen too many other famous people try to do that. And
it's repetitive. Yeah. Like we see it all the time.
Yeah.
In regards to, because they came for him.
Yeah.
They came for him, as far as him being a racist, I don't know how far I want to take that. And I say that because, first of all, like, whatever comments he made, I think Spotify pulled 70 shows or whatever that had already been on the platform.
Right.
Or whatever. So everybody was okay with that. Right. And all his millions of listeners, nobody ever said anything about it. Right. And my thinking was, all right, I'm not a listener, but the vibe that I got, that wasn't surprising to me. I didn't think there was 70 shows that were up on the platform that were throwing out the N word or whatever. But, I will say that there's a certain type of racial cultural ignorance with people that are from parts of this country or even parts of the world that don't grow up and live in diverse communities. They're only around people like them that agree with them, that look like them or whatever. So once people become famous, they carry that experience with them into the general public sphere. And the ignorance, which they don't realize is ignorance, they're just speaking according to how they would talk back home with people, because there's nobody that was really there that really got offended, and nobody was saying, hey, that's really not cool. You shouldn't talk like that. Certain people don't like that, and so there was nobody there to interject and have those conversations. So bringing that to a platform and becoming such a huge media figure as Joe Rogan's become, that just became part of his brand, just having those regular conversations like he would. But the difference now is that you have an international audience now. Everybody's listening. Everybody's picking up on it. So once he got called out, especially when they put together the whatever it was that they put together, a little compilation, and I did catch some of it. It looked really bad. And I guess it got to the point where he was able to really look at his own ignorance.
Right.
And I wouldn't say they were taken out of context. Mm-hmm. I think they were just taking exactly what it was. But as far as for him to be this this hateful person that wants to see harm come to, I didn't get that, or nor do I see it, him co-signing a system that also wants to, keep other people down like that. So I didn't get that vibe. But real quick, as far as the reality show, type thing. I didn't know he was involved in reality shows, but it makes sense. But, that's a generational thing, right? Because I'm with you on that, but we got to understand we got a generation that came right behind us that was raised on that shit. Like that, the Kardashians, like that's American royalty to a whole generation. I know of people, and a generation of people that where a majority of them probably don't know that reality shows aren't really real, you know? So you and I, we come from a different time where we're able to look at that and, you know, call it for what it is. It's bogus or whatever. So when people get their rise to stardom coming from a background of reality shows, we're definitely going to feel a certain type of way about them.
You know what? This is another podcast episode
I didn't think we were going to go that much,
because, reality TV shows started. The very first reality TV show was A Different World.
Yeah.
A Different World, New York City. That was in 91, I believe.
Yeah.
We were teens going into young adulthood. For the majority of our young adult life, like reality TV shows have been a thing. Yes, there was an entire generation raised on reality TV shows. I get that. That just further enforces something that has always been a thing. And I guess because I hate TV so much, I'm just so present to it, is that, bro, you need to have conversations when you watch TV, you know, and one of the because come on, let's be real. I'm sure you know plenty of people our age who are fiends for reality TV.
Yeah.
And I can never wrap my head around it. There are some people that I know that they're like, well, that's like my junk food for my brain. Fine. But like literally they're like fiends for that. And I just never understood.
It's my guilty pleasures. That's how it's described to me.
Yeah. It's like, no.
You're like 50
stop.
and you're watching teenagers.
Like, you know, I can't, but then anyway, again, another topic, but, to go back to what you were saying about how people who are raised in certain communities and then, you know, they're not really exposed. And then it's not until Joe Rogan was born in Newark.
Wow.
Which is another reason why I'm just like,
I didn't know that.
No, Joe Rogan was born in Newark, New Jersey. Now, I don't know where he was raised, but he's real quick to, and I was born in Newark, you know.
I thought he was like from the Midwest or something.
No, he was born in Newark, New Jersey.
Holy
now, again,
shit.
I don't know where he was raised, but again, here's another instance where just every time I encounter this dude, it's just a big, you know, the X on Family Feud, it's just another big red X. I can't find it. I really need to watch the Abby Martin and the Cornel West episodes so that I can maybe see a side of him that deserves my time. Anyway, with that said. But he's, you know, once again, just being informed and everybody's going to
taking a step back, pausing. No that's why we decided to focus on Joe Rogan, because ordinarily we wouldn't really be giving it that much attention, but it kind of sparked some curiosity between us, and I thought it'd be a good conversation and to be able to step back and see how he operates and see how his, you know, how the variety and diversity of his guests are. So that's why it became an interesting topic. Otherwise, we really wouldn't be talking about him too much.
Giving him more celebrity than he needs.
Yeah. So tell me about Puerto Rico.
Oh my goodness. You brought it up.
I'm always telling you, tell me about Puerto Rico.
I know. Gosh.
You are my window into Puerto Rico.
Yeah, apparently for several weeks now, there have been a lot of protests in Puerto Rico regarding a decision made in January about the plan to bring Puerto Rico back from bankruptcy. So back and I can't give you years and I can't give you specific names of bills and whatever, but during Obama's presidency, it was clear that Puerto Rico was, and I put in quotes, quote unquote, in debt. And so there was a plan to get Puerto Rico out of debt. They formed a fiscal board that needed to review the situation and then come up with a remedy and next steps. This board is commonly known on the island as La Junta. And so this board reviewed the situation and decided at one point that Puerto Rico needed to declare bankruptcy. Now, if you're familiar with bankruptcy, like let's say I decide to file for bankruptcy, right? The first thing they do is kind of like a discovery. So who do you owe money to? Right? Yeah. Okay. Well, my credit cards, my mortgage, my this, my that. Okay. Then what they do is they contact these people and say, okay, well, Michelle's filing for bankruptcy. How much does she owe you? So that they can get an idea. And so this is, again, what the board needed to do. Once they saw the situation, decided bankruptcy. So now communications start going out and they start, whatever. So coincidentally, in a podcast I was listening to, La Brega, which I've mentioned before, there was a particular episode about a teacher who had retired. She received paperwork to file a claim because it's possible that the Puerto Rican government owes her money. And she knew, yes, the Puerto Rican government owes me money because I was promised a raise that never materialized. And so she filed paperwork, whatever. There was a judge put in charge of the bankruptcy case, as with every bankruptcy case. All the information was sent in, all the claims were collected. And so you get classified. And again, I'll use myself as an example. Let's say I filed bankruptcy. My mortgage would take precedence over a credit card. If I owe PSG&G, they're probably not going to get their money, but the bank will get their money. If I had a car, then that would get paid, whatever. So something similar happened. A judge collects all these claims and whatever, everything got, allegedly cleared out. Naturally, certain people got paid, others didn't. Teachers, any type of civil worker that was promised any kind of money that never materialized, pensions, whatever, those people never got their money. So now what's happening? Now they got past the bankruptcy and all that, and now it's about moving forward. So that was a decision that was made in January, if I'm not mistaken. And part of that plan is also severely impacting the average Puerto Rican on the island, specifically teachers who were the first to really get out and protest because they're not given a living wage and their pensions are being threatened as well. I know for a fact that the police on the island are not given a pension at all. So, they've been protesting and protests are the norm in Puerto Rico, at the very least, as far as I know, since Hurricane Maria. I think, okay, let me backtrack. Not that they're the norm, but they've definitely become more common. Protest has been a way of life for the Puerto Rican people, I think, for so long. But I think that when you see one of our protests,
is it different? That's another thing.
You think it's a party.
Right.
It doesn't look like a protest because
they have traditionally protests look a lot different.
Right. So,
plus this weather permitting. So they could go on and on. So, if they choose.
For example, a lot of protests that have been happening recently, which we also briefly discussed, is about people that are coming in, building resorts on the beaches and claiming that it's a private beach. Right, there are no private beaches on the entire island of Puerto Rico. So for anybody to advertise a private beach, it's false. And so there was an incident several weeks back where somebody was setting up a volleyball tournament. Someone whose home was there came out and was like, I'm going to call the cops because this is my beach. And the girl was like, this is not your beach. Nobody owns the beaches of Puerto Rico. The beaches belong to the people.
Right.
And so it went viral. That video went viral because they went as far as the woman's husband sat in the middle of the area where they were going to set up the volleyball nets and prevented them from setting up the volleyball nets. And so, of course, they started recording. It went viral. And that Saturday was the day of the event. And I think this happened like on a Thursday. And within 48 hours, there was a full-blown party at the beach. But it was a protest.
You posted that.
It was a protest. Yes. Yeah. And so other people then started saying, hey, we're having a similar issue at our beach. And so now it's, so I think one of the more recent ones was in Dorado where, a resort was claiming, and our private beach. And people saw the ad and they went and they had their party at the beach. So, there is a lot happening on the island. As usual, the Puerto Rican people, we've been fighting for over 100 years. So this is nothing new to us. Maybe this is why our fights look like parties. Is because we're like, hey, if we're going to fight, we might as well have fun. But yeah, like the teachers are one. The firefighters have joined. A lot of the civil workers have joined in because they realize that today it's the teachers. Tomorrow it could be the postal workers. The next day it could be some other, civil workers group. So, yeah, I kind of appreciate how we see resistance though, and that's really what this is. This is resistance, to the bullshit, to the sellouts, because like the people that are in the Puerto Rican government, like they're Puerto Ricans,
right?
And they're just selling out to U.S. interests. And it's like, you sell out your own people, you're selling out your island, and it's disheartening, but it's kind of our way of saying like, fuck you. We're not going nowhere. You could close down the beaches. We'll take boats to get to the beach because this shit is ours, And so, yeah, I'm sure we're going to hear more and more about what's happening on the island.
We talked about Puerto Rico on one of our earlier episodes, and yes. I kind of explained my whole interest in being someone that grew up with Puerto Ricans, how it's just been like fascinating to me that, there's this whole side of resistance and politics on the island that I had never really heard about, and that's because people, at least that I know or that I'm linked with through social media or through, friends of friends or, friends of family or friends or whatever, where, it's just not talked about. Like I've spent plenty of time in people's homes, holidays or whatever. And I get it. I get it. Like, some people might worry about the pushback as far as, getting into the politics on the island or whatever. Some people just want to just move on with their life in the, here. And some people born here and don't really connect with the island, or they don't connect with the island as much as they would like to, like people to believe they do or whatever. So that's why I'm always like, touching base with you, and to the point where I'm, through my own independent media outlets or things that I read, I'm always like shooting you articles or clips or like, check this out, like I did on the, earlier about what was going on in Puerto Rico, because what I'm getting like through the outlets and everything that I'm consuming is like, this is a really big thing that's going on that nobody's talking about.
Right.
And part of it is, or a good part of it is because it involves regular everyday people, the workers, the proletariat class of people that, just like in any other type of situation, are pushing up against the system or whatever, and the bourgeois class. Mm-hmm. And this is why it's not getting talked about. And when I heard that, like, they were trying to dip into some of the teachers' pensions and start paying off the debt that Puerto Rico had, I was like, this is some bullshit. Like, they could just discharge that fucking debt and start really worrying about building Puerto Rico back up, But
some people would even go as far as, I know a couple of people in my circle that will argue that there is no debt.
Right.
That the debt is in fact owed to Puerto Rico. But that's another podcast episode. In terms of the Puerto Ricans that you may have encountered that don't discuss these things, It could be for many reasons. A lot of them are what I call the flag waving Puerto Ricans. Those are the ones that only show up for the parades. But every other day of the week and year, you don't hear, nothing out of them. Besides maybe when they go there to vacation, right. So they're there for the parades, maybe one vacation a year, and that's it. Then you have the ones that don't mention it because they are the sellouts that I speak of. Historically, their ancestors were the sellouts. They learned to be sellouts, but they still consider themselves, proud Puerto Ricans. And then you have the ones who just don't know. And then those are the ones who don't even really talk about it. You probably don't even know they're Puerto Rican because they just, don't even stay in touch with that side. So, but again, that's definitely, I know in one episode we did dedicate some time, to Puerto Rico. And I could definitely go in some more. Well, we
did say in that episode, we were definitely going to come back to this.
Yeah, totally.
And give updates. So definitely. So I guess real briefly, we talk about my newly found TikTok experience.
Oh my goodness. Really?
Yeah, I caved. I caved. So I've had a TikTok account. I want to say maybe about 3 months or so. I created it. I'm not going to say I had it. Like I've been active. I created it. I kind of, browsed through a little bit and, because a lot of the TikTok videos find its way onto Instagram. So a lot of stuff we're watching on Instagram right now is really coming from TikTok, especially with the reels.
Yes.
Cause that's kind of like formed in the format of TikTok. But I decided to, because my whole impression of it has always been that it's fuckery. And I'm not really with the fuckery, but I came across some videos before I got on TikTok of like-minded people that they're not on there to be silly. They're on there to have conversations. They're on there to educate.
Yes.
And I was like, this is a side of it that I don't really see. It's not a popular side of it, but it's a side that I'm interested in. So when I created the account, it was the intention to go searching, and I didn't really want to spend too much time because I was just getting hit with the fuckery. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to close that. I'm not going to deal with that right now. But I decided to go into it. And what I did was, in the search, I put media literacy, and not a lot came up, but it came up with some profiles with some people that are dedicated to media literacy. So they'll have like the quick breakdown, what I could call them like the express lectures that they do. They talk real fast. They hit their key points. I love that shit. I wish I could do that. Like they hit their key points. They do it all within like 90 seconds or whatever. But it's effective because this social media age that we are in, it's a low attention span age, and the younger generations, like they just can't really get with anything longer than 3 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So it's effective if they are good at catching someone's attention for that moment and then breaking it down. And I'm seeing a lot of the younger folks that are, their mind is blown from the information they're getting. And now you can share, you could go behind it and it's called the duet. You can have like the side by side with the original profile or whatever. Yeah. I probably didn't use it too good, but that's the feature. The feature duet is when you see the side by sides and the people are having reactions, even though they already saw it, because if they didn't see it, so they're supposed to be initial reaction. Mm-hmm. So they kind of like, but it's a way of sharing and propping up whatever message is in that video. Right. So I started to share some of the older clips that people might know me for sharing on Facebook and Instagram, old lectures, old speeches, of different civil rights leaders or whatever. Like it might be like Stokely Carmichael or, some that people have never heard of, some mm-hmm. authors or things like that. And for some reason, a couple of my videos, like last week or the week before, I'm not going to say they went viral because I don't really know what the protocol, what the standards are to go viral. I don't know how much has to be viewed or shared or whatever. But, it took off. Like people were just like liking and sharing and commenting and whatever. And I, I put the phone down because I'm trying not to really get sucked into it where I'm on TikTok all day. But I found myself every so often picking up the phone to check my notifications. And it's like 20 new followers, 50 new followers, 60 new. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? What are they looking at? And I'm going back in and it was just like certain lectures that I posted that is from the spirit of critical race theory, but you won't know it because they're not saying critical race theory. But, one particular one where it's talking about systemic racism and it's broken down just like the founders of CRT break it down, where they, she talked about how, after the civil rights era, how it was just this assumption that we were in a colorblind society. And she spoke about how after the civil rights era, the language and the laws were changed to be race neutral.
And so stuff like that got a lot of hits and.
Yeah. So it blew people's minds and the majority are young, but a lot of them were older people too that hadn't been really up on that.
They're too busy watching reality TV.
Yeah. The guilty pleasure. So I just kept on with it. I was like, what I actually did was I went to my Instagram and went to my old posts and just took pieces out of shit and just put it on there. And so I gained like, I want to say I'm close to like 3,000 followers, which I know in today's standards is not really a big thing, but I got like 1,500 followers within like a 24-hour period of doing basically nothing because I'm not doing my own thing on there yet. Cause I posted a couple clips from our shows, but I enjoyed that engagement, right? It showed me that, not only like I don't have to get caught up in the fuckery and it's not all about the fuckery. It could have some good use, but at the same time, I'm able to kind of train the algorithm to give me less fuckery, not zero fuckery, because that's like impossible, and give me more, give me more profiles, give me more, influencers that are educating and talking about meaningful shit to me. And a lot of the clips I've been sending you clips of it, like check this guy out, check her out or whatever. So, we'll see where that goes. We'll see if we can kind of like implement that to the WWIU brand. We might see you on there doing the express lecture.
I just got onto TikTok over brunch. So
right. Like right before this recording.
So let's see, because I have really been on a kick to get off social media.
Yeah.
I still stay on and do my thing, you know what I mean? But like it won't be uncommon for me to just post one thing a day and that's it, I just have so many other things going on and it is a time vampire. So yeah, but no, totally keep us posted on your TikTok journey.
I definitely will.
I will do the same.
I'll give you updates.
I'm taking cues from you.
Yeah, matter of fact, I'll probably include my TikTok in our link tree.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to just kind of like browse a little bit or request me or whatever, or follow me. I don't think there's actually requests. You just follow. Like I think the whole request thing is whack anyway. Like why you need to approve? Like if you don't want me to follow you, don't.
Well, if so, my Instagram and my Instagram and my Facebook are both private.
Very private, because I can't even share what you have on there. It annoys me, but I don't want to. That's your space. I don't.
So request me, and I'm only kidding.
No, I'm on there, but I can't. I can't like if I want to.
I know.
If I want to share something or whatever, and it's private, or an Instagram where I want to take one of your posts from your feed and put it in my stories, it won't allow me. Like I got to screenshot it or whatever. And I'm not doing all that.
It's not that it doesn't allow it. It just says that not everybody might be able to see because my profile is private, and unless they follow me, they can't see it. But I know what you mean, because that's happened to me before. You're right. It is annoying. But yeah, you have to request if someone's profile is private. But on TikTok, what I'm getting is that...
No, they do have privacy settings, actually. But most people don't have their shit private.
Okay.
I noticed the trolls have their shit private. The ones that want to be... Because naturally, the type of content that I put up, it attracts the vermin, of our society, and which I'm there for. I'm there for the bullshit. Like I'm, every once in a while, just for recreational purposes. Yes. I need to go to battle.
Keeps you young.
Yeah. So it keeps me sharp. It keeps me educated. And what I learned a lot just by having, I'm not even going to say debates, because the mentality of some of these people is like, they're not trying to have any type of meaningful discussions. They're just trying to attack you, and whatever you're saying, they want to just, label you as a commie or whatever, and, whatever. Like, so I'm there for the bullshit. Like, there's times where I welcome it, but also I got to put a cap on it and recognize that shit'll wear you out. If you're not really mindful. So we are moving on to the final segment, which initially turned out to be what we wanted to cover a good majority of the show, but we had to really touch on some other things. But this is, like we said, February 27th, which we are coming to the conclusion of Black History Month. However, Black history is U.S. history. Black history is world history. So it's not really a conclusion of everything. Mm-hmm. But we did want to honor a couple of figures. Perhaps some people are not aware. They're not just the regular MLK, the usual, Rosa Parks, how the corporate media and the capitalist class, they elevate during the month of February, and then we get these special sales. We get to come out in honor of Black History Month and buy more shit that we don't need or whatever. That's part of the bullshit. So we're just going to briefly talk about a couple of people that we felt were needed to be talked about and needed to be make people aware of.
All right. So as a musician, I know that, like you mentioned, a lot of the typical figures, but there are two musicians in particular, and one of them I just found out about, that made an impact. And so one of them is new to me. I actually found out about him through one of my band members, James Reese Europe. He's known as the Martin Luther King of music.
Wow.
Yeah. So just a little bit about him. He was born February 22nd, 1881, sometimes known as Jim Europe. He was an American ragtime and early jazz band leader, arranger, and composer. He was the leading figure on the African Americans music scene of New York City in the 1910s. U.B. Blake called him the Martin Luther King of music. He was a band leader, and he put together a band that performed a concert at Carnegie Hall. It was a benefit for the Colored Music Settlement School. It was called the Clef Club Orchestra. And while it wasn't a jazz band, they're credited with being the prototype of jazz. Mm-hmm. And again, he, put this together. He was also in the Army, I believe, and he was with the Harlem Hellfighters, and they're credited with being the band that introduced jazz to Europe. And, a lot of times, right, we watch movies and we see the European scene, some, French cafe, and there's jazz playing in the background. That's really because of him. Right. And that's because of him and the Harlem Hellfighters. So, as much as I criticize current music, and I use the word music loosely, having learned about him, I got that, the U.S. has birthed some greats when it comes to music, especially the fact that the majority of American music has its roots and its beginnings with the Black community, and it just doesn't get mentioned enough. So again, this guy's name is Jim Europe, is how he's known. James Reese Europe is his first, is his full name. Mm-hmm. And he was credited with being the Martin Luther King of music, just really opening a lot of doors to Black musicians, being the prototype for jazz with the Clef Club Orchestra, and introducing jazz to Europe, in a way that, to this day, has had an influence there. He died really young, in 1919, where basically he was like at the beginning of like really blowing up, right? Because, especially at that point, there was a lot happening, for the Black community. He died suddenly due to, he had an altercation with a drummer in his band, and he got stabbed, and he was just like, oh, whatever, I have a show. The show must go on. Oh, wow. And he didn't treat the wound, even though they were telling him go to the hospital. And he was like, no, the show must go on. And he went home and he died. But yeah, Jim Europe, look him up.
So before I get into the person that I want to talk about right now, I want to kind of give my position on the Second Amendment and guns. I know it's going to be really weird, but so I'm a person that I don't like guns. I don't like gun culture in this country. I don't like the obsession of guns. However, I do support the right to legal gun ownership, because I recognize that in this country, because of the history, that there are groups of people that need to be able to defend themselves. And so they're like, why are you talking about that, Scott? Why are you talking about guns? Right? And how does that have to do with Black history? It has everything to do with Black history. So I just recently decided to talk about it because I read a book called The Second: Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America by Professor Carol Anderson. And what she does is she breaks down the history of the Second Amendment and the well-regulated militia part. And she kind of highlights, like we always hear about, they're going to come take our guns. You ain't taking my guns or whatever. And the reality is that white people never had their guns taken from them ever in this country, but Black people have. And I'm talking about not only on a white vigilante level, but I'm talking about at a government level, and she talks about that, and she breaks down the hypocrisy in the Second Amendment. But that impression that we have also about African American, Black Americans in this country is they were nonviolent, not the Martin Luther King story, nonviolent, didn't defend themselves. And that's just so not true. So to give an example, I want to talk about Dr. Ossian Sweet. Not really, wasn't a civil rights leader. He was a physician. And I just wanted to read a little bit about him and the situation that, made him, I'm not going to say popular, but made his story known and what caught my attention. So this is coming from an article that I read, and it's talking about, how he, in his humble beginnings, wanted to become a doctor to try and help the poor. Right. He was born in Bartow, Florida, 1895. He was the grandson of a former slave who lived in the Jim Crow South. When he was 5, he watched from the bushes as a Black man was burned at the stake. Years later, at his murder trial, and we're going to get into that, Sweet would recall the smell of kerosene, the crowd taking pieces of the charred flesh as souvenirs. So when he was 13, his parents sent him up north. He worked his way through prep school and college, at Wilberforce University in Ohio. It was the first Black university owned and operated by Black Americans. He went on to study medicine at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Upon receiving his medical degree, Dr. Sweet joined thousands of other Black Americans who were migrating to Detroit, most to work in the auto industry that began to boom. Mm-hmm. Between 1910 and 1930, Detroit's Black population increased 20-fold. The fast-growing population, however, meant competition for housing and jobs. Sweet arrived in the summer of 1921, seeking to become a doctor in the overpopulated Black Bottom neighborhood. Despite being a northern city, away from the constraints of Jim Crow laws, Detroit was not exactly a welcoming environment. So, to summarize it a little bit in the respect of time, he bought a home in the Detroit area where he also opened up a private practice. He was already aware because there were in fact, there was another doctor and some more well-to-do folks that were, the epitome of the American dream, doing what they were expected to do or whatever, and looking to buy homes, being met with complete hatred and white mobs when trying to move into certain neighborhoods. So with Dr. Sweet's story, when they were moving in, they anticipated that there was going to be trouble. They kind of got the local word that was going around that they had planned on gathering. So the first night they were able to, there were a couple of people that came by, kind of peeped them out or whatever. But the next night when they came back to start moving in more, this is when they heard that there was going to be a mob that was going to show up. Back to the article real quick. On the first night, Sweet and his wife were joined by his brother Henry and 3 friends. In anticipation, they brought guns and ammunition. They said, well, we have decided that we are not going to run. We are not going to look at any we're not looking for any trouble, but we're going to be prepared if trouble arises, mm-hmm. right? The local police inspector and a detail of officers stood outside the house to protect Sweets. As people started to gather, and they began to throw rocks relentlessly at his home. The police stood by and did nothing but look on until a shot was fired from inside the house by Henry Sweet, Dr. Sweet's brother. A white man outside was killed. All 11 adults in the house were arrested, initially denied counsel, then denied bail by a judge who presided over the preliminary hearing of the murder trial. But mob justice and a prejudiced police force did not rule the day. The NAACP agreed to come in and take on the case and defend the Sweet and his friends and family. They gathered money through fundraising about, kind of put the word out what happened and what was going on. And he was a respected member of at least the Black community, So, and during the trial, the defense became based on the history of race relations in this country, because this is a common thing, especially, back then. So, in his testimony, Dr. Sweet explained, when I opened the door, I saw the mob. I realized I was facing the same mob that had hounded my people throughout our entire history. I was filled with fear that only one could experience who knows the history and the striving of my race. After the trial, along with the deliberations, there was a hung jury declare a mistrial. Mm-hmm. A subsequent trial of, because that was only his trial. Mm-hmm. His brother, Henry, resulted in an acquittal. After which the prosecutor dismissed the charges against all the remaining defendants, including Dr. Sweet. Like back mm-hmm. then, at that time, that was huge. That was unheard of, right? Like, had that been in the South, they probably wouldn't have got to the trial because the Klan probably would have showed up at the police station and did what they are known to do. Right. So Dr. Sweet and his family never moved back into their house that they bought. His wife Gladys caught tuberculosis while she was in jail. Remember, they had no bail. They were detained all that time while going through the court proceedings and the trials or whatever. And she ultimately passed from the disease along with their infant daughter, who died soon after contracting TB. Sweet's misfortune continued. He had to sell his house in the 50s. And in 1960, he ended up committing suicide. You gotta remember, he won the trial, but the experience alone, the trauma behind that, then his wife contracts TB from being incarcerated, then his infant daughter, like, he loses everything, and he ultimately committed suicide. He's recognized, however, that Garland Street home that he bought but never really got to move in is recognized as a historic landmark. So I thought that was really important, because here's a guy, like I said, like the American dream, that this is the pull yourself up by the bootstrap story. Mm-hmm. This is what you ask for, right? And we know now about the hypocrisy, like that, at least at that time, where that was outright rejected, like or even if you did do well for yourself and you were able to pull yourself up, like, you're not bringing that over here. Like, you keep that in your own areas. And I'm also saying that to say it where they defended themselves. They had guns, they were registered guns, whatever, but they weren't protected as far as the right to bear arms or the right to protect your home. Because they're always talking about, I need my AR-15 to protect my home and my family. And that's exactly what he did. And they try to crucify him for it.
Right.
So I just thought it was an interesting story, and it ended up as a sad story, but it's a significant story as far as, Black history and American history as a whole.
I think it's a common story also of how we don't realize the impact that these actions have. The mob at his house, he's protecting himself. And while a lot of people might be like, oh, well, he won in the end. No, he didn't, because he lost his wife. He lost his child. I don't know what ended up happening to his practice, but his community lost, it's
sad, but significant.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that this is also, I could see you, addressing these, Second Amendmenters and be like, yeah, you're right. Like Dr. Ossian's sweet. That's your poster child.
Because you know what?
Because they don't even know the story, and they'll probably arbitrarily agree.
Neither did I. I was aware of the hypocrisy when it came to the Black Panthers, right? Mm-hmm. But I didn't go deeper and find out, like, there's a whole legacy of Black African American people that were armed and protected themselves. I've also read where we hear about the civil rights movement and Dr. King and his following, but I've also read books where, him and his following were predominantly, that they believed in nonviolence. They were unarmed or whatever, but there were people around them mm-hmm. that were armed as a way, I guess I want to say as a form of protection, like because they understood what they stood for.
Right.
And they respected that. And of course they were at the same goal, but they were like, we're going to just be here on the side just in case, you know? And so there was a lot of talk about a lot of people laying in the shadows and laying in the cut, because they were, especially in the South, where they were expecting the Klan to show up at certain things like that. And they were ready. And that's something that's information that seems to be, whitewashed, mm-hmm. Because we don't want to have that vision of, African Americans standing up for themselves, not just in protest and not just in nonviolent movements, but prepared to meet the necessary violence, as a form of self-defense.
Right.
Just like, the slave revolts. Like in our mind, according to the education that we got, the slaves just, maybe a couple of them try to run away. They felt the wrath, the consequences once they got caught. We know about the slave patrols, but we don't know about the numerous slave revolts and the fear in this country that vibe and that spirit from the successful Haitian revolt was going to find its way to which it did. So those are parts of our history that are suppressed because it's not going to be a good look. We don't want any more uprisings, and we want to continue to, I guess, present this false narrative. in order to preserve the white power structure.
Yeah.
Basically.
Totally.
And that's basically what it is. I ain't even really got to go on and on about that.
That's another podcast topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I got more stories like this, but, I definitely wanted to talk about him because it's something that I became aware of him and I read about him a few years ago and shared about on social media. Nobody really paid attention to, but now that I have a voice on a podcast platform, I'm going to make you hear it.
We're so lucky. So my next person is somebody that from a very young age I idolized because, I've been singing all my life. Started in church. That's how most of the famous singers start, right?
Yeah.
They all start in church.
The choir.
So I started in church, and then I want to say it was at some point in high school or maybe early on in college, I heard of Billie Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, so it had to be around the time that CDs came out also. I had heard about her, but when CDs came out was when I was really like...
CDs, what's that?
Yeah, I know. When CDs came out, I went in, I owned a couple CDs, and I just, I listened to her style. I practiced her style. I was fascinated easily. Billie Holiday is one of the women that very early on in life I idolized and I admired. And I knew there was a lot of pain in her voice and in her song. I watched Lady Sings the Blues years ago, back around that time, got the story. But then I recently watched The United States versus Billie Holiday.
Mm-hmm. On Hulu.
On Hulu. And it was very difficult for me to watch that movie because of how I feel about this woman. And seeing what ended up happening to her. Not surprised that she was a target of the U.S. government and how it rolls. I had to stop watching the movie at certain points because I was feeling that strongly about it. I did finally make my way through it, and I then watched an interview that Oprah did with Lee Daniels, the woman who wrote the screenplay, which I completely forgot her name. Susan L. I believe is Parks. But in any case, if you've watched the movie or if you look it up, The United States versus Billie Holiday, and then also with two of the actors, the Andra Day who played Billie Holiday, and then the actor who played Jimmy. Anyway, whoever the other guy was, he's one of the main characters. The only reason I felt good about this movie was watching that interview with them and how they very deliberately interpreted, what happened and how they called on Holiday's spirit to be with them while they were telling her story. Mm-hmm. Because it needed to be told. This is a woman who, like I said, when I first heard her music, I was like, there's pain, you feel it, but it's a grounding kind of pain that like liberates and, and you hear her humanity and you can't help but connect with her. And then watching her story, I knew, what her struggles were, but for the U.S. government to target her, because they didn't like a song that she sang. Mm-hmm. Because it fucked with their need to perpetuate the white supremacy. Mm-hmm.
It fucked with the social conscious.
Yes. Yeah. And because it was going to wake people the fuck up to what was happening, they targeted her. And up until the day that she was on her deathbed, they were trying to frame her for having drugs on her, because by this time, historically, the war on drugs had started, while Reagan coined that term, I think officially, or maybe Nixon did, right?
Yeah.
It had already started.
This was way before.
It had already started, and it was all about criminalizing poor people and people of color. That's what it was all about. And so that's exactly what they did here. They didn't like the song. They told her to stop singing it. She refused. And so they were like, go after her on the drugs, criminalize her. She did time. They were relentless in their pursuit of her. They would not give her cabaret license. So I guess back in the day, in order for you to perform and sing whatever, you had to venues, have, right. You had to have your cabaret license, you know, and being a performer too, and being someone that was even like in the nightlife scene, you know, if your bar's not making money, then you can't, you know, so I get it. But they wouldn't give her cabaret license, all kinds of obstacles, pulling her out. Like, who knows? Again, we're talking about the U.S. government, but just everything that they put her through, you know, and it kind of brings me back, like, the misogyny in all of it, the racism in all of it, this wasn't even about class, because going back to, you know, you say the whole mentality is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, this lady did that.
Right.
She could travel the world times over, you know, because she was Billie Holiday. But, you know, that wasn't enough for them. While she is famous, I don't think she's definitely famous for being a singer, for her talent. And this movie highlighted that she needs to be famous for her activism. Yeah. You know, and the fact that she died for the cause. Yes, she had her issues, but, you know, listen, if the U.S. government was behind me, I'd probably be hitting the bottle and hitting all kinds of other things too. You know, they certainly didn't make it easier. So, and then the fact that they were trying to arrest her on her deathbed is just inexcusable. So, Billie Holiday is another person that, when it comes to Black History Month, and we're on the cusp of Women's History Month. So, you know, right. on the heels of that, also, Billie Holiday is the other person that I wanted to mention. Someone I always loved, but I didn't know about her activist side. Right. And you know, what she did for the civil rights movement in just the ultimate sacrifice, which was her life, you know? Right.
So, I saw that movie too. It's not really popular. It didn't go viral or whatever, but when things like that come across my screen, I'm like, all right, that's something I need to see. I was aware of the story. Not initially, no. Like, the lady sings the blues thing was more of a love story type thing. And it really, you know, they couldn't really get into the, you know, the social and
it was her biography.
Right. They couldn't, you know, and that was a time when, you know, when that movie was made, they want to avoid tapping into some of the more sensitive issues, you know, at the time or whatever. But I did become more aware, because of the drug part, definitely. But the activism part, you know, the song Strange Fruit, which is the song that you mentioned, that, you know, they, you know, which described person that was lynched hanging from a tree as being the strange fruit in the South. And, you know, I encourage anybody, if you've never heard it, like, go and Google it or go to Spotify or whatever and just listen to the lyrics. And think of it as, put yourself in that period of time when it happened, and it caused a lot of, you know, it stirred up a lot of shit, which is the activism part. That's what activism is about. Like, right. People always say activism is not designed for you to be comfortable. Like, it, you know, so, but more importantly, and it will probably lead this into another discussion, which we already talked about, but we talked about early drug war. Like, our impression about the drug war is Reagan, and then some people found out, no, it was Nixon. It was like, no, it kind of went back to like early 20th century, maybe even late 19th century.
Prohibition.
Right. Yeah. Which is a whole nother thing around really pushing that legislation. But real quickly, before we finish, the certain law enforcement figure that was after her. And
Ansley.
Yeah, Anslinger. Yeah, Harry.
Okay, there you go.
Harry Anslinger. And what he was the first and founding commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in the 1930s, which would be known today as probably like the DEA.
Right.
And so he had the power of the federal government behind him. And because she was, she struggled with addiction. She struggled with heroin use. And he was able to use that he was able to criminalize her because of that, because he couldn't criminalize her because of the song, because that was free speech.
Yes.
So he went after her because of that, and he really, really ran her into her grave because she refused to stop singing that song.
Yep.
So when we talk about the drug war and we talk about the racial context behind the drug war, where people will be like, no, that's not true, this, and they're like, no, it is. If you really look at, especially this character, Harry Anslinger, and I just happen to have notes on him because of a little marijuana legislation timeline that I did a paper on years ago, where we talk about how they criminalize marijuana, why they can't legalize it so simply on the federal level today, because it's so deeply engraved into the Controlled Substance Act or whatever. So we'll talk about that another time.
So just to go back to something that you said also is that, back when you watched, Lady Sings the Blues, that, they didn't really go into that. When you watch, it's also on Hulu, by the way, the interview that Oprah does with Lee Daniels. Yeah. And I watched it right after I watched the movie, and I'm glad I did, because Oprah said that. Oprah was like, I've loved Billie Holiday all my life, this and that. And I was like, yes, Oprah. And she said, she goes, I'm just now learning this in watching this movie. And I always knew about her, her issues with addiction and whatnot. But, why am I just now learning about? And something that they say is that this movie came about, it's based on a book. And so this person wrote this book because there were, years of interviews done with several people. And in these interviews, they sat with someone who brought this up, and how the U.S. government targeted Billie Holiday, and so they ended up writing the book. So, it is something that back when they did the movie Lady Sings the Blues, which might have been like in the 70s, right?
Billy D. Williams.
Right. Diana Ross. Right. Yeah. This wasn't known.
Right.
This wasn't really, talked about. And so it wasn't until, and I believe these interviews then happened like in the late 80s and the 90s. The fact that even still it took this long speaks to something that we're also told a lot when we bring up issues of race and class. But that happened so long ago. Why are you guys still bringing it up? Because of stuff like this. Because of the fact that this woman experienced this back in the 40s and the 50s. And it is now 60, 70 years later, and we're just getting a movie about it. That's why. Yes, it happened a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago that somebody in their lifetime couldn't talk about it. My father was not that young, was not that old when he passed away. Neither was my mom. They could have still been alive today. Okay. They experienced this. They saw it. They lived it. You know what I mean? But did they know what was going on? No. The same thing could be happening today. We are experiencing and living many things. Do we know the whole of it? No. Especially with mis and disinformation going around. That's where I'm going to stop.
That's why we continue to read and talk.
Yes.
And have discussions and share what we've come up with.
Yes.
Which is one of the purposes of this WWIU sensation.
Is that what this is?
Yes, it is.
Are we at the good news portion?
We are, but or do you have good news?
I do.
Oh, okay, because last I checked, I remember we were searching and you were coming up.
I got good news.
All right, good news, because I don't have any, so I'm definitely all ears.
I got good news. Please hold. You did this the last time on the good news. Here's your birthday gift.
Oh.
Yeah.
You totally got me with that.
You made me open my Christmas gift on the good news post of one of our shows.
My birthday gift. Last time she sang happy birthday to me.
I did sing happy birthday to you, but I love birthdays. I love my birthday and everybody else's.
Your birthday's coming up, correct?
Yes, it is.
See what type of sneaky shit I'm going to do.
Oh, no. We're not recording that one.
Oh.
We are not going to, or maybe we should record that episode. So all the listeners, if we should record the episode of my birthday to see what Scott got planned.
See what we're going to come up with.
Please chime in. The majority of the vote wins.
All right.
We're going to hear all this.
Hold my wrappings.
Crumpling paper. This is how long it's been since we've seen each other. Yes. That he got his Christmas gift and his birthday
almost
gift.
Didn't make it today because we got the germ in my house.
Oh my gosh.
But,
keep safe, people.
Yeah, but because it's still here. We're talking about war and all this other stuff. Oh yes. First, I'm gonna. You and I have this thing with political messaging on our T-shirts. We march, y'all mad. We sit down, y'all mad. We speak up, y'all mad. We die, y'all silent. All right. We're gonna have to do a Zoom. Some Zoom action on another episode so we can get this message up on the video. And I also got, some of you are not going to like this. I got a book. Of course I got a book. The name of the book is Black Marxism. Ooh, sound effects. I got to find the sound effects.
Yeah. Ooh.
Black Marxism. The making of the Black Radical Tradition by Cedric Robinson, which I haven't read this. I have this in like a PDF format, but it's not something that I really wanted to read I don't like PDF formats when it comes to reading. You like
to highlight.
I like yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And it's not like EPUB, or Kindle where, because I do a lot of highlighting, and I know I'm a little geeky like that.
That's okay.
Because I need to come back to some shit. Like sometimes, especially when I'm, people coming at me, I'm like, hold up, because I read about this already. So just want to make sure, and a lot of times I like to revisit stuff, so the whole highlighting, I could probably read a lot more books a lot more quicker if I wasn't doing all the highlighting or whatever, but that's just my process.
It's all good.
Thank you for this, dear.
You're welcome. Happy belated.
Thank you. Oh, this is going to be great because you know what? And we'll close with this. My intention has been to read more Marx, more theory. Cause I have books and I have material. But it's not the easiest read type stuff. Like you really got to get into it. But a lot of the stuff really makes sense to me. And it seems like it's always been present, always been part of me. And when I start reading, it starts connecting the dots for me as far as, especially when it comes to like Marxism and Black radical, tradition, which, like I said, a lot of people are not going to really want to hear about or talk about. I can hear some of you calling me communist already, but it is what it is.
You're our favorite commie. Anyway.
It is what it is. And let me tell you something. And this goes back to kind of the war thing. And I didn't really get to touch on it, but I think it's important. The immediate reaction with the whole Trump-Russia thing and going on with Putin immediately had me looking at Russia as the villain, Putin as the evil dictator, which that has some truth to it. But I really didn't know why I thought the way I did. And and a while back, like I was telling you earlier, how I got caught up on the whole Trump-Russia gate thing. And, it was really entertaining, really exciting. I was locked in that echo chamber. I was locked into Rachel Maddow and I was getting all that corporate media good shit, And, luckily I had a variety of sources and I started hearing other perspectives from the left, by the way.
Right.
That were criticizing liberal media, so-called corporate media.
Got it, yeah.
And I was like, that was interesting to me. Like, what are they talking about? So I had to take a look at where that came from. And what I came up with is, as a child growing up, at least in our era, action heroes in the movies was a really big thing. And growing up, there was like Rambo and Chuck Norris, all these Vietnam movies, movies about Russia, where they're the bad guys. Yep. They're the evil.
Always. And
the action hero were the Americans, the heroes. And I hadn't realized how deeply that was tucked into my psyche, I guess, if you will, or whatever. So when it came to modern day, I'm a grown fucking man, almost in middle age, and thinking about Russians, I kind of tapped into that perception of evil that I picked up as a child. And that, you know, and what I realized, what I've learned through my reading and research is that was by design. That messaging in the movies were, even though the Vietnam War had passed or whatever, but what we learned about the Vietnam War back then and what we know about it now, or what we're learning about it now, is completely different.
Just like Billie Holiday.
Exactly. So, you know, it made me touch into how Vietnamese, Russians, which were the Soviet Union back then, which were communists and socialists, how they were demonized and how that shit was embedded into my thinking.
Yes.
And how it, all these years later, carries on to modern day politics and modern day issues. And that's really something that's concerning for me. Like we always talked about, like this whole process and this, what we're doing here also involves a self-assessment.
Yes.
And us having to take a look at and unlearn some shit that's not healthy for us.
Yeah.
And that's just basically what I want. So like if you call me a communist, even though I don't think I know enough about communism to call myself a communist, I don't take that as an offense.
Me neither.
Right? Because I've unlearned some shit.
Yes.
And I see things differently now. And I really realize how this corporate controlled media under the white power structure has really caused us to think a certain way about our fellow citizens, our fellow countrymen, and our neighbors in neighboring countries and around the globe.
That whole divide and conquer mentality does not work.
It's deep.
That whole divide and conquer mentality is meant to maintain power structures. The elite, the rich, political machines. No. Meanwhile, like I said way in the beginning, all these wars, all these pissing contests that these politicians are having are all at the expense of the working class.
Absolutely.
People like you and I and our listeners who are just trying to get up every morning, have breakfast, go to work, have some semblance of just a life.
And have some joy in our spirit. You know what I'm saying? That's all. I was in therapy one time, and I remember, I don't want to keep on going on. We're going to wrap it up.
Yes.
But I was in therapy one time, and I remember real quick that, you know, when I first sat down with the therapist, she was like, what's your goal? Like, what brings you here? What do you want to get out of this? And I told her, you know what? I just want to be fairly happy, and I just want to experience a little joy. Because there's a lot of shit going on, and I don't expect that to go away with my therapy, but I just want to feel some joy. That's absolutely for real.
Absolutely. With that, we have joyfully brought you this episode. We're gonna do it again in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Yes.
This is self-love.
It is.
This is self-love.
In the meantime, I want to remind you all that we appreciate you following, sharing. If you could give us some reviews on Apple Podcasts and on Facebook, that would be awesome. Remember that following us on Facebook also automatically gives you access to all of our podcast episodes.
Absolutely.
From our Which Way Is Up page show. So it's just like Which Way Is Up show page. I keep transposing words. I'm so excited that I'm seeing you live. That's what it is. Anyway, so yeah, listen, follow, like, share.
Hit the link tree. The link tree will be in the podcast description. It's on all our platforms, on our profile pages. The link tree gives you links to all our platforms and social media accounts.
We love you guys for listening.
Thanks again. Peace.
Peace.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the tree to drop. Here's a strange and bitter cry.